Hello, everyone. This is Josh and Dan again from Monastery Dropouts. Thank you for joining us. Today, we want to talk about this concept of love, and I want to talk about it on the deepest levels of love and the connectedness that is there. In this world, there's this dance of, the light and the dark, and then the grays in between. And so we see all these dramas occurring around us. And because we're living in this world, this physical world, we get easily caught up in it. In our minds, when something major happens, it grips us and our emotions can start to fly around and they can capture our ego. And our ego gets very tight around it. And so I just kind of want us to relax. I want our minds to relax. I want our emotional bodies to relax and to let go of what Eckhart Tolle would call that pain body. Just let that open up and just feel the love that is that wider consciousness. And I like to call it the primitive consciousness, or original consciousness, because it's a very, very ancient and sacred consciousness that pervades all of reality. And I think it's important to recognize that that's the wellspring from which all things arise. And so, whether it's that dark aspect or that light aspect or the grays in between, that the wellspring and the thing that everything comes from and it will go back into is that wider consciousness. And intermixed in that consciousness is a deep, deep love. And it's not just like this fluttering in your heart that you feel when you're a teenager. It's like it penetrates every cell of your being and it's a vibration that keeps you alive. And when you go into it, your body falls away and it's this little spacious vestige of a body, and you're this wider consciousness. And so as the dramas of life come up, which they always do in everyone's life, it's important to, as we feel our thoughts and emotions get caught up on it, it's important that we take a deep breath and slow down, and we allow those spaces to occur between our emotions and between our thoughts, and so that we can move into that space, because that spaciousness, that's where we find that loving aspect of the divine. And the reason I want us to open up more and more, open our minds and open our emotional bodies, is, for one reason, is when our bodies fall away, we need to be able to fully open up. And one of the things that pulls us back into the karmas and the dramas of day-to-day life in the physical world is that we're scared to move into this wider light. And so imagine a light that's so bright that it penetrates you, and if you're closed up and clinched, it wants you to open up and it's trying to force you to open up because that's its nature. And if you want to move into that, you have to be fully clear and fully open. And if not, you'll kind of flee back into this wheel of life and death. And so it's important with these day-to-day dramas that occur. We're at 2026 and there's dramas, but there was dramas every year for the last millennia and like millions of years. And so there's always dramas in life. And that's one way we learn, but it's one way that we also learn to grow and open up and become more wise. And so I just want to focus for this video on the concept of moving into that wider space of love.
Sounds like a great idea. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I had heard someone say once that one of the reasons that people move back into life after they die, when they're like, when that soul body or that psychic field of consciousness that we are, that vibrational body, that that the divine is so bright and so amazing that it's overpowering. And so people, they get pulled back by, because the karma that you have, which is your mind and which is your ego, it feels more comfortable in those darker spots. And so it kind of flees back, almost like if you're part of the shadow, you kind of flee back into the shadow. And so maybe that's just a analogy. And but I think the concept probably is somewhat true, that the more we can move into the light in this world within these bodies, the easier it is for us to move into those wider states of consciousness. And then in that sense, death is it's the death of the ego. And so the ego gets scared of it. But death for us is just like a changing of clothes. And so we just get to move very easily and flow kind of down that river of expansion.
Right. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's a Hindu text about a ancient battle, which is symbolic. But the warrior Arjuna, he's with Krishna, who's like the Hindu Jesus, I guess. And he's with Krishna. So Krishna is God in a human form. And Arjuna asks Krishna to show him his full glorious form. And so Krishna says, okay, I hardly anybody on earth has ever seen this, but he does that. He allows Arjuna to see him in his full glory of God. And he said it was so overwhelming that it was terrifying. And because he saw universes being created and destroyed, and civilizations being created and destroyed, just everything. And I wondered about that when I read that. I thought, that's interesting. Would that really be terrifying? And but it's like that principle that you were talking about, that the light was just a little bit it's a little bit scary, overwhelming light. When you pass on and you see this light, people may retreat from it. But I thought, wow, Arjuna was a yogi. Why would he be scared? But then I was meditating one time, and my consciousness, my awareness was expanding in my mind's eye. I kept seeing greater and greater things. I kind of wanted to have that experience. And I was starting to see so much that I realized, like, oh, I didn't get to that point of Arjuna where I was like terrifying, but what was happening was it was kind of like a fear. And the fear was that the universe is so big and there's so much that you felt like you were disappearing. And so I'm not sure if that's exactly, how Arjuna felt, or how people who might retreat from the light feel. But there is something that if you see so much of what has been created, if your awareness expands that much, you almost feel like you're disappearing to just witness it.
Yeah, and I think there's a balance there, and we've talked about it before. But as you go into those more and more expanded states, what's happening in the physical world, even with our bodies, or how we identify here on the physical plane, it becomes so distant that the physical body doesn't even, it seems so small, that it's so insignificant that you don't really care about what's happening with it.
Yeah.
But there's a balance there, because it's really important to still love that little your to love your body, even though it's, if it's like in numbers ideas, it's like 1% of who you are in that wider sphere of consciousness. But it's important to stay with it and love it while we're here. And I think it's important for everyone to recognize, or just remember, there's so much more going on. There's an infinite timeline that's happening. And so these small things that happen, they're important, but ultimately they're just small turnings of that wheel of kind of like the film that's playing, that is our life. And so in modern times, there's more, there's violence, and there's political things going on that are, they get scary, or we feel a lot of emotions with them. But when we take that wider perspective, there's just love there, and you just feel that bliss of that wider consciousness. And so it doesn't mean that we should, not take the things that are happening in life as important. I feel like we should do the things that we're moved to do, and we know what they are because we feel such a strong movement in that direction. Um, so we still need to live our physical lives, but there's a balance between taking that wider view of the world and our life, and then the smaller view of when we're caught up in our ego and we're this big instead of this big. It makes a large difference.
Yeah, definitely. And the ego is the one who's afraid of disappearing. It's
Yeah,
not your real self, your consciousness. And
yeah,
I could kind of sense that, it's like the ego is not feeling good because when it sees all of creation and just even just the larger creation, not all of it, and you start to see everything going on in the universe, you, you feel, yeah, you don't feel significant anymore. And
yeah.
the ego is afraid of that for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about it in this context too. Like in this world, we see black and white, and we see the grays, and we see the dramas. But in that wider view, you kind of everything is light and everything is
Mhm.
love. And so I think it's important to remember, even if it has to be just like a thought at first that can expand out wider later, that the things that we see as negative or black or the violence and things like that, on a wider view, that is just movements of divine love, and the divine holds it within its consciousness, and so that means that us as vibrations that are in union with the divine, it's just movements within us, and so
Right.
that person or thing that we see as bad, that is an aspect of ourselves, and it's ultimately it's a divine aspect.
Yeah. And that's definitely a hard thing for people to accept that, people doing evil things are the same child of God that we are.
Yeah.
Same part of the same God, part of the same consciousness. Um,
Yeah.
that's you definitely have to get to a higher level of consciousness to accept that.
Yeah, and on a practical level, though, I will say that, if you have a dark thought, like if you have a thought that's not good and it's not going to get you anywhere, this is what Ram Dass said. He's like, if you have a dark thought and it's not going to get you anywhere, you love it,
Hmm.
and you just keep loving it because that's what's going to get you out of it. If you get caught up in that thought and you keep judging it, your ego gets pulled into it, and you're providing your ego with more energy.
Hmm.
But if you can love it, then it's kind of like watching a leaf flow down the stream. You just watch it go by, and then it eventually disappears. And it's like a thought when you're in meditation. If you just watch the thought without judgment and you don't follow it, it will just go away. It just evaporates. Like there's nothing there. It's like a cloud in the sky that floats by. It just eventually just evaporates. And so those dark things, in the beginning, it's challenging to love it, but if you can love it and just watch it, it will eventually evaporate. And so that's what moves us to those higher planes, is because the karma of our thoughts and the feedback of our thoughts, those disappear, and we become just pure consciousness if we can just watch things and love them.
And that makes sense from how yogis describe the metaphysics of the universal structure. Uh, according to Sri Yukteswar, who was another great yogi, who was Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, um, you have, the ego is pulling you toward what they call Maya or delusion, which is just the physical universe. It's pulling you toward what your senses tell you is real in the physical universe. But love is actually pulling you the other way. It's pulling you to God, beyond the physicality of the universe. And so eventually it will be love that returns you to God in the end. So yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you just watch it and you love it.
Pretty simple.
Yeah,
Very
it's a
simple.
it's a simple way to live, and it's a great way to live.
Who
Just
knew
watch everything.
enlightenment was so simple?
Yeah, yeah, it's really beautiful. Well, yeah, so I think unless you don't have anything more to say, I think that's kind of the message we wanted to talk about. And I just like the idea of loving things and just letting things be the way they are. And um, I think in my own life, and I'm sure well, I don't know, you could tell me, but I feel like as my heart is opened up and as I've just started like loving things and people and not judging them, um, things shift and you can see them shifting in a way that these positive things they just start to come towards you. And if there's a negative thing, you just love it anyway. So you just always are full of love. And then those things drift away. They're not present as long because you're not really giving them the feedback energy that they need. Um, and so the love doesn't do that though. The love just kind of, it's not involved in this push and pull. It's wider than that. And so it just kind of keeps filling you more and more and more.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. The more you are in a state of unconditional love, um, the more your outer circumstances will change, how people react to you will change in a positive way. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a pretty cool thing.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining us. I think I'm tearing up, and maybe Dan is too. But it feels really good. It
My
feels good
heart
to talk
feels
about
good. My heart
it.
feels
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Monastery Dropouts. This is Josh and Dan.
Bye,
Take care.
everybody.
Uh,